Welcome to the Old Soul, New Soul Astrology Podcast. Thomas Miller here along with Robert Glasscock. Robert has been practicing astrology, just to kind of set the stage for this, since the mid-1960s. So that gives you an idea. Not only is he old, but he's been doing this for a long time.
Rub it in.
And you have a lot of wisdom that you have learned from this, and we're going to tap into that wisdom here a little bit. This is also a topic that is really on my own heart because it's an area that I love from my own upbringing, where I was taught something in a particular way that ended up not serving me as an adult. And the astrological understanding that I have learned in the time that I've been studying this has completely revolutionized that. So what we're going to do is talk about parenting, about raising your children under an awareness of astrology, which is, I have to say, as a parent or a grandparent, those of you who are involved in the upbringing of kids, and maybe you're a parent and your kids are in their teens or 20s and you think, no, you didn't. There's plenty of time. And with the wisdom and understanding of astrology, you can make a huge difference in just giving them a little bit of guidance according to the way that they are wired to live this life. In fact, Robert, there's that famous expression, kids don't come with an instruction manual. I would say, oh, yes, they do. And it's their natal astrology chart. And the difference about reading that, in fact, on holidays, you get something and poor dad has to put the thing together. And you go, God, these instructions are not very good. Well, you have to learn to read the instructions. And that's particularly relevant here. So I just thought we would have a little talk back and forth about, this isn't necessarily picking your brain on a given issue, but there is just a whole lot of inherent wisdom locked up in this chart that wise parents can unlock for themselves and be able to teach their children with a great advantage for how that child is wired.
Oh, I think you're absolutely right, Thomas. I can only think back. I didn't know a thing about astrology until I was just about 21 years old. And it is the one thing, really, that has meant the most in my life as far as understanding myself and then understanding what I needed to do to solve the problems that I had or continue to have in life as they show up. And I read for other people, for clients, children of all ages, really. I often read for newborn children who they're not old enough to even be showing signs of their own signs, so to speak. But, and then I read for children who are not for the children, but for their parents, from 6 all the way on up through even in adulthood still. I still have people in their 50s and 60s who want to know what's going on with this particular child. So it's something that you carry all your life, this natal chart, and then the transits to it, and the progressions to it, and the solar arcs to it, if you want to go that far. But even a just simplistic understanding of the planets in the signs in a person's chart, or the planets in a house in a person's chart, I think can be really helpful. And it's a two-way street, raising children. Certainly you're there to give them guidance and protection and discipline and love and trust and self-confidence. Maybe self-confidence is one of the things in most children that needs to be built up and reinforced. But you're also there to discover what you got, not what you want. They're not blank slates that you can write on. They come in with fully inherent characteristics and dreams and hopes and traits and longings and talents and problems. They're already there when they're born, and they will play out on all levels, high and low and good, bad and indifferent. But astrology at least helps a parent, I think, understand a child's growth and development over these different stages in life, which are common to all of us, Saturn returns, for example. That's an important time of year, time of life. The transit of Uranus opposite its place at birth, around in the early 40s, is another epoch in everybody's life. And where it occurs in a natal chart, in the signs and maybe the planets and aspects and so on, can be tremendously helpful. So as a self-help tool, it's great, but as I think a help for parents in understanding is sometimes parents don't understand the clash, between, say, this one child, where I don't have any problem with my other two children, but this one, suddenly astrology can maybe provide some insights and some answers.
There's a verse from my upbringing in the church that I really liked. It was in the book of Proverbs, which was written by old wise King Solomon. It says, "Train up a child in the way that he or she should go, and when they are old, they will not depart from it." And it's like, what it says is not train the child in the way you want them to go, mom and dad. Train them in the way they are wired. And boy, I'll tell you, just in the contrast of my own life, you learned this young, I learned it old. So I had a lot of living that I was doing, trying to feel my way around in a dark closet, trying to find the light switch. And you had the light switch all those years. And that's a big difference, because I'll tell you that since I learned how to interpret this chart and apply it to my life all of a sudden got fun.
It's interesting what you say, because it takes me back, and I love that quote from Proverbs. And of course, the quote is, train them in the way they should go. And the minute I hear the word should, I know that you're in what in transactional analysis is called a parent ego state. It's a two-way street. I think it's the parent's responsibility and obligation to be so connected with their children, or that child, a child, that as the child grows and develops, it will show its own natural interests and inclinations, and you encourage those as long as they are safe, and support them, and they will shift and change as the child grows. But maybe within that, especially early encouragement, if you find a talent in a child young, encourage it. It could become the basis of their career. It's interesting what you say about life became more fun. I think I've always lived my life probably on that. Is this fun? And if it isn't, I'm going to go find something that is. And I don't mean in the superficial sense of fun, like going to a carnival, but finding the things I love. Now, in my case, I was encouraged from, day one, really, as an infant in a crib. And my dad was a Navy medic. We were sharing a big house with 3 other Navy medic couples, but I was the only infant. And they tell me that after dinner every night, because the guys we were in Pensacola, they were going to medical school on the Pensacola Naval Base during the day, and they'd come home and have dinner, and then they would put on records, and I would stand up in my crib as a 1-year-old and a 2-year-old and hang onto the crib and dance to the music, and they would applaud me. And I have to say, that has to be why I wanted to go into show business. Come on. But also as a kid, I was raised, my dad put himself through LSU with his own band. So I was raised with music. I started taking piano lessons at 6. And my dad would play trumpet, so we would play together. I was encouraged. I started taking art lessons at age 6. So they encouraged this side of me, which is all true. That's my bliss. I have Taurus of the arts, among other things, on my 5th house of creativity, and Venus, ruler of my 5th house of creativity, in my 10th house of career. And that's really been my life. And a dear friend of mine, once went to a psychic, Thomas, in Los Angeles, and she told him, you are going to meet, and he told me this was before he had ever met me. This guy studied with me in astrology classes. And apparently this was 5 years or so before he met, and we got to be great friends. He's no longer with us. But he said, this psychic had told him, you're going to meet a man named Bob. He is so much fun. And when he told me that all these years later, I thought, what a great thing to hear about yourself. But I've had a lot of people tell me that. So, and I hope it's true. My life has been fun, and it certainly has not been without its ups and downs, but it really has been and still is a fun existence. I just am constantly astonished at how much I love this life. I truly do. But it's because when I got old enough to start thinking about a career, the last thing my parents wanted me to do was to act on my bliss, to go into show business or move to Los Angeles. That was they wanted me to be a doctor. There's the should in Proverbs. Train them up in what they should do. I would have made a lousy doctor, trust me, but they would have been happy. And I'm sure it would have been maybe a more stable career, but I wasn't interested in stability. I was interested in following my bliss, in having fun. And it's worked. I'm healthy. I'm secure enough, as secure as you can be, and I absolutely love my work. So, and I think it's true for you too.
Oh, yeah, for sure. For sure. And now it's gotten much more exciting. Let's go through here and maybe just talk about a few things that people should become aware of if they want to parent their children according to their cosmic instruction manual. Obviously, learning the planets, the signs, the houses, the aspects, the basics would be a big piece of that to get started with. And look, if you guys, some of you have are fairly new to astrology, and if you would like something that is just a resource that's out there, I created a course a couple of years ago that is a 101 course that just gets you proficient in the skills of astrology. It's always available. It's on the funastrology.com website. You're free to go there, and it's $97. It's just the price that it is, and not very much. I think there's 12 or 13 hours of video instruction there, and it's all in fun astrology style, bite-sized. It's short, so you don't have to dedicate hours and hours to learning it. And that would be a really good way to get to the point of where you are at least understanding of the signs and the planets, the houses, the aspects, the very basic core of astrology that you have to learn to speak the language. Well, that would be a way to get you there. So then you can start to interpret your own child's chart, even when they're born. I mean, once you know that birth time, Robert could talk about rectifying that as well. But hopefully, if you're even a young couple that are having a child, somebody in that operating room needs to be assigned to looking at that clock. Right? Capture that right birth time. Dad, that's your job, is to coach mom, and then when that baby's coming out, when that first breath is taken, you're looking at that clock. 12:42:21. That's a good birth time. And we don't have to cross that bridge later. But then there are so many other things. So, Robert, then I guess we would be looking at things like, once you know the basics, you can start applying all the various things. Like one thing I'm thinking of that I remember Steve Forrest had this in one of his books. The progressed moon is one of the first aspects, lifetime aspects that happens. And it's about a year and a half before the Saturn return, which is generally around 29 and a half. So somewhere around 28-ish, 27 and a half, our moon, our progressed moon, comes all the way around back to the original position that it was in our chart. And as he described, I love this description, what we create emotionally, we manifest through Saturn. So it's the law of attraction kind of manifestation, creation paradigm showing up in the chart that says to me how we spend those young years, our teenage years, our years in our 20s, emotionally, how we are in our soul, how we create things inside. When Saturn comes around a couple of years later, it squares all of that up. And boy, if we've done a good job of that in our teens and our 20s, then that Saturn return is going to literally pave the way open to our adulthood with very little fanfare, with very little interference.
There is so much that's so great, Thomas. Everything you're saying. To start with, in a child's chart as a parent, you want to know their sun, moon, and ascendant, and you mainly want to know the sun moon relationship because that will tell you what that child's perception of mom and dad is. If the sun and moon, for example, I'm a full moon baby, and this is very common to children who are born at a full moon. The father, sun, and mother, moon, are in opposition to each other. Now, that can mean, depending on the other aspects to both ends of that opposition, if they're favorable trines and sextiles versus squares or in conjuncts, that will tell you whether that child's perception of mother and father and family and homes and security and parenting and all of that, the sun moon archetype, is harmonious or not. Mine is not. And in fact, when I was born, my father was going down on a ship in the English Channel. He was a Navy medic, so I didn't meet him for about 9 months after I was born. So they were literally separated at the time of my birth. I have later learned in life that I was an accidental baby. I was the first baby that they had. My dad was planning to divorce my mother. He came home on leave, I guess, or something from the Navy, and she got pregnant. Of course, he had to go back. So they did not get divorced for 26 years. But that was the atmosphere that I was born into. And so that's my perception of parents and of men and women and home and family is my sun-moon opposition. And it's in a grand cross in my chart, along with Saturn, you see. As I've said repeatedly in these podcasts, I have a horrible chart. When I first set up my horoscope back when I was about to turn 21 and read about it in the A to Z delineator, oh my God, this is horrible. Is this my fate or can I do anything about this? Of course you can do something about it. But so very, very early, I was aware of that subliminally, of that split really between my parents. Other people are born with maybe the sun conjunct the moon, which is a completely different perception of a marriage and men and women and security and parents and so on. So the
That
sun
was me.
moon,
I'm a new moon baby.
I see a new moon baby. So your parents were very close together. You were raised in a pretty strong Christian background, I think,
Yeah,
too, weren't you?
they were tight all the way through.
So they were a unified force on that field. So you always knew where you stood. With me, for example, I have that sun moon opposition and I have Saturn. Let's just say it's my Saturn is on my descendant, my seventh cusp, exactly opposite my ascendant. So it's a grand cross. But even so, you could say I have Saturn in a T square, which I do with my sun and the moon. No matter what I did, it would please one parent, but not the other one. If it pleased the other parent, it displeased the other parent, you see, so I couldn't win. And that was my perception. I can't do right by this one or that one. And by age 10, Thomas, and I mean it, age 10 years old, which happens to be the degree of my ascendant, the degree of my Saturn in Cancer, and so on, age 10, I began to realize I don't like these people. Love them, absolutely. And I mean it. I was not abused or anything. We were physically a very physically affectionate family. But I knew I didn't like them. I didn't like the way they behaved. I didn't like the way the town that I lived in. I didn't see any married couples of my friends that I wanted to be like. And every year after age 10, I realized more and more how different I was from my parents and how determined I was to get as far away from them as soon as I could, which I did at 20.
You know, there is so much. I'm just thinking here that we could talk about on this. I mean, we could get into solar arcs because, see, look, some kids are born late in a sign, later degrees in a sign. So when they're at an early age, they might change from Aquarius to Taurus in solar arc. Well, that's
Absolutely.
significant. That's a big deal. Or you might be born early in a sign or say 5 degrees in or something, and it's a long time. You're an adult before that changes. Well, that's something that a wise parent following through the chart could help their child understand. There's that piece. There's the movement of the outer planets, what they kind of call the lifetime. You mentioned Uranus opposition. That's at age around 42. You could break that into half and talk about 21, and then you could talk about up there where I am, where Uranus has gone all the way around and is in that other side, the other square, the waning square, I guess, if you will. But there are so many of these characteristics. Chiron, 50, and I know you don't follow Chiron, but at age 50, I'll tell you, that's when my life changed, was when Chiron came back to its original place. These are all things that people could understand as they're raising kids, and obviously then kids start to talk this language and they're aware of exactly kind of what their path might look like. Maybe we should do a series on this. We'll have to see. People, if you like this and would like to know more, let us know, either on the SpeakPipe. That probably would be the best way to do it. Just leave us one of the SpeakPipe messages on the funastrology.com website, and we'll continue this if you like this idea of more information. But goodness, Robert, I guess we could even write a book on this probably.
Well, don't put ideas into my head. Absolutely. What you said, though, about the progressed sun, for example, its ingress into the next sign. My sun at birth was 820 Libra, so roughly 2122 is when my sun progressed into Scorpio, an entirely different sign from Libra. Up until 22, I was a Libra sun, and that was my life force. And I think of the sun, Thomas, the symbol of the sun is a circle with a dot in the center. I think of it, the sun, as a target that we are aiming to become in life. Not something we necessarily already are. I'm born a Libra, but that's the target. I'm aiming for balance and harmony and collaboration, et cetera, et cetera. Meanwhile, of course, I've got the moon in Aries, which is all about me, 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 me. And that's a lesson that I have had to learn. But then at 21, 22, my life changed completely as the sun progressed into Scorpio and headed for Venus at 4 degrees Scorpio in my 10th house of career. And that was exactly when my career in Hollywood began.
And wouldn't it have been just amazing for you to have had a wise set of parents who could have coached that into you and made you aware of that, so that then enabled you to make the decisions that could have been best for you at that time?
Yes, or it would have been nice to hear you're not crazy. It's just Uranus trying your sun, Bob. That's all.
and to say, go for it. You need to go try to do this. This is in your chart. This is baked into your DNA. No pressure to be a physician. You need to go give this a shot. See what happens with our blessing. In fact, once you get set up out there, can we come visit? And that you would have had a relationship with them where it would have been okay. You would have said, sure, come on out.
Well, and too, I mean, the older you get and the wiser you get, especially if you have astrology to help you. I realized I did the only encouragement I ever got from my father, because he certainly did not encourage me to move to California, was I guess around the mid 80s or 1980 or somewhere in there. I started writing for television and was on the phone with him one evening, telling him, I guess, about the project, the latest thing I was working on. And my dad, this was it. My whole life, this was it. He said, well, I guess you got what you wanted.
See, that's too bad.
But it didn't matter to me. It just told me more about him. But it was so revelatory of the kind of guy he was. The truth, Thomas, and I've realized this too, I have lived out another probable life that my father would have loved to have lived. And I asked him, because he knew so many musicians and pit bosses in Las Vegas and Pete Fountain and Al Hurt and these guys. And I said to him, as much as you love music, why did you pick medicine? And are you happy that you did? And he thought about it for a little. He said, no, I am. It was the right. And it was. He made himself responsible for his mother and his sister. He was the man of the family.
And that was a generational thing, too.
Yes, it was. So, but I realized I went to Los Angeles to get into show business, and I did. And I won a scholarship right off the bat to the Pasadena Playhouse, and I was acting, and it was a wonderful 2 or 3 years being an actor. But by then, astrology had found me. Well, good luck. My dad couldn't brag about his son, the astrologer, not in Pine Bluff, Arkansas. He couldn't.
Yeah, not in
So,
1960.
so I'm sure he resent. But meanwhile, I was doing what I loved, and actually, when I won that scholarship, I phoned home to tell them. I said, "You guys will never have to pay for me again," and they never did. But it was hard for him. He was a Sag, and they just can't be wrong. And it was very difficult for him to ever acknowledge that I was happy, because he wasn't. That's the problem.
Yeah, yeah. It's quite the gift if you as a parent could give your child the wisdom and understanding of knowing their chart. In fact, I was reminded as we were talking there that there is a module in that 101 course about these lifetime planets. So we went through all of those aspects. So that's built in there as well. We don't talk about that course very often on here, but just seem to be fitting this topic of if you'd like to pick it up. It's just go to the funastrology.com website. It's right there. You can't miss it. And if you would like to talk to Robert, maybe even about your child, this would be a great reading session to have with him where you bring your child's birth chart to the table and ask him about that so that he could give you some of this same wisdom about how your child is wired. Well, he's available for that. And that would be in the show notes where you would find the contact information of how to reach out to him directly. Thank you so much for listening. Hope this was interesting for you. A little bit different for us to take on, but a very, very relevant topic. We'll be back with more on the Old Soul, New Soul Astrology podcast with one of the best astrologers on the planet, Robert Glasscock. Thanks for listening.